Hello there. If you are watching this later on and we don't know each other, my name is Corey, and I am a husband, a father, a podcaster, a writer, a speaker, and a strong advocate for Black lives. The movement for Black lives is important to me. So, welcome. Hello to you who are watching later, all of you coming in live on Facebook. Hello to you as well. This is Existential Sunday. And it's a space that we've carved out for people who are deconstructing either their faith or a worldview in any way, shape, or form, or decolonizing their faith or worldview. This space is welcome to you, to all of you who find yourself in that space, right? You got more questions than answers, or you don't even feel like you've coming out of a tradition where you don't feel like you're even safe to ask questions. This is a safe space. This is a safe space for questions. And not a space for people even who have arrived anywhere. Like if you've arrived somewhere in your ideology, I need to be following you, watching your broadcast, because I am on this journey. I am journeying, I am growing, I am deconstructing, I am decolonizing, and I don't think that's a process that ever stops. An epiphany I had last week as I was talking about this. So welcome to all of you. If you're new and you're wondering if you can share this, you're more than welcome to share. No one ever has to ask me if they can share the broadcast. It is always a shareable thing as far as I'm concerned. If you're watching this later and you want to wait to the end and decide if you want to share it because you're like, I don't know you do, that's fine. You can wait to the end. But I can tell you that today, what I want to talk about, I got like all these fiery thoughts in my head. And this is something I haven't actually talked about as of yet publicly, at least not that I remember. But I have so many thoughts bouncing around in my head about this thing. And I want to spend some time this morning just talking about it. I don't even know how long it'll be, to be honest, because I just got some stuff I need to get off of my chest. So bear with me as I talk about it. And those of you who are not a part of any faith tradition, I want to say to you that like today I'll probably talk more about the Christian religion, which is the tradition that I come from, than I normally do. I think it'll be more than normal. But let me take you back to me. This is not one of those sad stories either. I'm not going to talk about, me giving up my first place medal or trying to dance and having people make fun of me like I did, because I know, I'm not trying to do tear jerkers today. But I was in a youth group around 1996, 97. And in this youth group, we had a youth retreat that was titled WWJD. Now, I don't remember if this was like the catalyst for that movement, or if, because the youth group was pretty prominent, or if it just happened to coincide with this general movement that was happening. But I remember having this tension, like, wait, did our youth group start this WWJD thing? Because it, eventually became bracelets and T-shirts and hats and everything else, right? And this youth retreat was basically telling all of us teenagers that we should consider in our behavioral like decisions when we decide what we're going to do, who we're going to date, if we're going to drink that alcohol or smoke that weed, that we should pause before we do anything and ask ourselves the question, what would Jesus do? And so I remember that, right? I remember like leaving that camp thinking that faith, or that the exercising of Christian faith was exercised through the lens of behavior. Like, and not just behavior, but like thinking about what would Jesus do. And I remember seeing athletes wear the WWJD bracelets. And when I saw an athlete on television or like a celebrity on television wearing a WWJD bracelet, I thought, oh, that person must be a Christian, because they had the bracelet on. It associated them to me with my faith. And I thought, then this person must behave in X, Y, and Z ways. They must this person must not cuss, because I was very conservative, right? So I thought, so when I'd watch an athlete playing basketball with the WWJD bracelet on, who in the heat and passion of basketball said words, or football, whatever, said words that my Christian sensibilities were like, oh no, then I thought, oh, this person's just wearing the bracelet but doesn't abide by the thing. And as I've gotten older, I've started to realize the fundamental flaw of WWJD thinking. Right? It's a flaw that you guys who are watching this, a lot of you who are watching this are probably already ahead of me, like, well, duh. But there's this like really, really problematic question that isn't addressed in just static WWJD. And the question is this: who was Jesus? Like, if I'm asking myself, what would Jesus do? I have to in asking myself that question, there's like this, I have to have some information about who this person is I'm talking about. Like if you were to say, what would Corey do if you somehow decided to live your life that way, which would be ridiculous. But if you somehow decided to live your life like that, what would Corey do? You'd have to have some sense of like who I am. Not just like the things that I do, but like who I am as a person. What is my worldview? What position do I hold socially in the world? Those things will affect how you decide what you will do. And I think this is like where I get, and I'm going to get into in a moment what's really got me a little gassed up about this whole thing. But like, I think this is where I see this tension and the issue arise for Christians when it comes to Black Lives Matter. Because I've heard more than a few times recently, and even had some people ask me about, how does a Christian support a Marxist organization, even going so far as to say an organization who on their website talk about the disruption of the nuclear family, people who are pro-LGBTQ plus and women's right to choose, or as Christians call it, abortion. Like, I think that it's interesting to me how the WWJD culture has caused people who have a view of Jesus that is white and sort of floats above culture, but floats above culture as a white man. People who have that view of Jesus, who are asking the question, WWJD, of course, you're going to come to the conclusion that there's no way that Jesus would support an organization that has the things on the website that the BLM website has. This is the problem. This is why there was an NBA athlete, as well as a national baseball league or Major League Baseball athlete, who felt that they were, excuse me, hold on. I'm about to get into this now. Hold on. You guys, I see, so I think you're sharing it now. I think you need to share, because this next few minutes, I'm really about to get into some stuff that some of y'all may be upset. I don't know, but I got some stuff I need to say. It's possible that these couple of athletes who decided to stand when everybody else was kneeling thought that they were acting like the Hebrew boys in the story where Nebuchadnezzar wanted everybody to bow down to him, and they were like, we only bow down to God. It's possible that that's what they thought, because again, people who hold this flawed ideology about God and about Jesus tend to look at Jesus through the lens of whiteness, through the lens of what European male dominant society tends to tell us is true about God and about Jesus. So it's always in opposition to Black lives. American fundamental Christianity, from the time it arrived here in America, on this continent, I should say, because it wasn't America, from the time that Columbus and them arrived here and discovered a place where people already lived, America has been a place where if it's not white, it's not right. So anything that does not originate for white people, by white people, when it comes to American religion, is consistently throughout our history over there, heresy, you name it, it is not accepted in the majority culture. Let's walk back through history for a moment. It was Christians, people who professed to be Christians, who owned slaves. It was people who professed to be Christians who were, I already talked about this many times, who were attending, sponsoring, putting on lynchings of black bodies. It was communists who condemned lynching of black people, which is, let me say this again. It was communists who did. The people that we as Americans in our beautiful democracy are supposed to be at odds with, and that we're supposed to reject, and we're supposed to push to the side. It was communists then who were coming to the aid of black folks. The FBI was monitoring Dr. King because they thought he was too aligned with communist ideologies. And now today in 2020, after the lynching of George Floyd, we're finding more Christian ideology raising this Marxist flag again, going, oh, we got to wave a flag. We need to halt the movement for Black lives because they are too aligned with Marxism. They are too aligned with communists. Again, the same thing they said about Dr. King. And now today, there are black athletes as well as white athletes who are saying, because of my Christian identity, I cannot support the movement for Black lives. Yes, and there's some parsing here. I don't want to be unfair to the young men who have decided that they didn't want to take a knee. Let me be very clear as I say this. You don't have to take a knee to support Black lives. That you don't have to. You can have problems with some of the ideology of the BLM movement and still support Black lives. But what you cannot do is, or at least you can do what you want to do. What is not a good faith argument is that I'm not kneeling because I'm a Christian. I don't support these things that the Black Lives Matter movement supports because I'm a Christian. That to me is flawed. It's a flawed understanding of history, and it's a flawed understanding of Jesus. It's a flawed understanding of how this entire construct works, which is why I said this whole WWJD, what would Jesus do, needs to be tethered to who is Jesus, if we're going to do that at all. Because if we're all being honest, we have been doing this tug of war with Jesus when it comes to the movement for Black lives. I watched a video yesterday of a white pastor who was making the argument that Jesus would do this, and this in regards to Jesus would be a protest and Jesus would do yada, yada, yada. Maybe. The reality is that Jesus, if you read about the Jesus of history, there was a lot of mystery. Jesus walked up to a pool where people were sick. And as the story goes, that this pool would be stirred by an angel, and that if you could get in the water first, that you would be healed. But if you couldn't get in the water first, you wouldn't be healed. There was a guy who was by that pool for a bunch of years and could not get in because every time he tried to get there, somebody beat him to it. Jesus healed that man and walked past a bunch of other sick folks and left. We in modern society would say, oh, well, of course, Jesus would heal all the people who were sick there, but he didn't. Jesus' cousin was in prison facing execution for preaching about Jesus, for saying that Jesus was, for basically opposing oppression and for being the forerunner of Christ in the way that, the Bible describes it. He's in prison for that. And Jesus never one time goes to visit his cousin in jail. His cousin's beheaded. There's no record of Jesus mourning it, being sad about it. There's just Jesus. So when we start to say in our society now, well, I know what Jesus would do, you're lying. You don't know. and to have the posture and the idea that you do know what Jesus would do is fundamentally missing the idea of Jesus to begin with, which is somewhat shrouded in mystery. The divine in general, when we start talking about what God would do, is a mystery. So then we're left here to go from our own sense of goodness, from our own sense of what we can see with our own eyes in front of us, what we can understand about God and the nature of God as best we can. We can look at things and go, it seems wrong that that police officer had his knee on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes. It seems wrong that Breonna Taylor was asleep in her bed and police officers on a no-knock warrant, who turned out to be in the wrong house, shot and killed her, and that the people who shot and killed her are still not in custody today, that people who murdered Breonna Taylor are still roaming the streets. It seems wrong. I don't need a bracelet or a mantra to tell me that that is wrong, that there's something not right with that there's something needs to be done about that. I shouldn't need a WWJD to tell me that Ahmaud Arbery should not be dead today, that Trayvon Martin should not be dead today, that Tamir Rice should not be dead today, that Elijah McClain's killers should be in custody. I don't need WWJD for that. I don't need to align with everything on the BLM website for me to wear a t-shirt, for me to hashtag it, for me to make the statement. And you know what? Most Christians don't either. Don't be fooled by this. I would like to see a show of hands in the comments below, which I know maybe some of you do. Maybe some of you are meticulous like this. Most of us do not go to the website of whatever it is that we're aligning ourselves with to make sure we agree with everything before we decide, oh yeah, I'm with it. Most Christians don't do that. In fact, most Christians I've talked to have said, I don't agree with everything my church says or does, but it's a great church. And I'm following, and I'm serving, and I'm volunteering, and I'm giving my money, and I'm bringing my kids here, and I trust them to teach my kids. So many conservative Christians, watch this. I sound like the late Eddie Long. Watch this. So many conservative Christians said to me back in 2016, 2017, and many of them still saying it now, that I don't agree with everything the president says and does, but I still rock the MAGA. I'm still voting for him. I still support him. I'm still praying for him. I still think he's great. So yada, yada, yada. I still believe he's doing great things for this country. However, when we move to the movement for Black lives, it needs to be squeaky clean. You need to agree with everything in order to jump on that train. That's a you problem. That's a stooped in, seated in, rooted in white supremacy problem. That is not an issue of the Black Lives Matter website and what they oppose, support, don't support, don't oppose. That's not what that's about. This is about what America has always done when it comes to Black movements. It has always tried to find a way to either suppress it, disagree with it, or question it. Always. Even the great MLK, who white evangelicals and conservative Christians to this day, once a year we march out Dr. King, we put up his speeches, we put up the stuff he said, and we present this sterilized version of a man who was accused of being a communist during his time, who was killed in all likelihood. I'm saying this for those of you who are like, you know, the fact checkers. We allegedly, probably, most likely by the U.S. government. The FBI was tracking him illegally. They were threatening to put out stuff to damage his character, all because they believed he was a communist, because America others the movement for Black lives. It makes it this scary thing that you should be afraid of, which is why there were, what's that term called? Interlockers? Is that what that's called? I don't know. Andre, if you're on here, put it in the comments. There's this term for people who show up at protests to agitate and make it worse. And we know that early on in the Black Lives Matter protests following Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, we know that there were white folks showing up to stir up violence, so that movement could be associated with violence. And now today, for a lot of conservative, especially conservative white Christians, the movement for Black lives is parallel to violence, the destruction of property, anger, you name it, a bunch of Marxism. All of these things is like, let's make sure that we associate Black lives mattering with all these things that white folks are afraid of, so that white folks will never see with their eyes and understand that what we are talking about is the most deeply moral challenge of our day and the previous generations. We're still sitting in a deeply moral challenge, fundamentally moral challenge about the movement for Black lives mattering. And I am tired of seeing professed Christians say that the reason that they cannot support Black Lives Matter is because of some Marxist or communist, and certainly unequivocally because of the LGBTQ community. I'm tired of that. And even the Black folks who take that stance, because this is not just a stance that only white folks take. We've told you before, when I say we, me and the folks I've had on Existential, for those of you that subscribe, many of us have talked about how many Black folks also subscribe to anti-Black sentiment and don't even realize it. And the majority of those people who are doing so because they got folded up in a evangelical Christianity that they bought into. Because they don't understand that when we are talking about Jesus, we are talking about an ethnically Jewish, Palestinian, brown-skinned person who lived with, among, and as a part of a people who were traditionally oppressed and enslaved, who always remembered that they spent 400 years as a people as slaves and lived under Roman occupation and as people who were less than and othered, who were not a part of the great society, manifest destiny of the Romans. They were not a part of the I forget the terminology for it, but they weren't a part of that. They weren't in with the majority culture. And so now today in America, we are not taught generally, and even a lot of Black folks are generally not taught by people who know what it is to be a part of an oppressed people group, who understand what it is to be a part of a lineage that traces its lineage back to 400 years of slavery, that knows what it is to walk into a grocery store and have people look at you differently, that knows what it is to be redlined, knows what it is to have a president use dog whistle politics last week to say to those people who live in suburban neighborhoods, which are predominantly white folks, that you ain't got to worry about Black folks moving into your neighborhood. That's in essence what he said. We heard that. We know that's what he was talking about. Many people don't know that's what he was talking about, because, especially Christians, because as my good friend Michael McBride says, they've never been discipled by somebody Black. Black folks understand what it means to be oppressed and to have faith as a part of our ideology and how we think and what we have to have that is necessary for our survival. We have to have faith in something to get through it. It's why even amongst evangelical Christians that start churches, pastors and leaders who start churches, if you ask them, what's the number one problem in your suburban church? It's that people don't think they need God. Because they're affluent, they're wealthy, they're educated, things go well for them. They're not oppressed. They are not facing oppression. So this is why so many white evangelical Christians have to make up oppression, like, oh, they're asking me to wear a mask. So they have to find a way to associate with persecution by some fake ass persecution instead of actually aligning themselves with people who are literally dying in the streets So we'll find a way to be persecuted. Oh no, California is saying we shouldn't sing publicly because of a deadly virus that's killing people. But we're being persecuted as a church because we can't sing songs. We can't gather in person. That's persecution. If that's persecution, it is a natural persecution. COVID is persecuting you, not the police, not the president of the United States, not constructs and institutions that have been built to keep you from succeeding and moving forward, not ideologies that keep showing up when you try to move forward, like it happens to Black Lives Matter, which is a movement that now has a name, but it's been around since the country started. Abolitionists were essentially saying Black Lives Matter. Civil rights activists in the 50s and 40s and 60s were essentially saying Black Lives Matter. Today, people are saying Black Lives Matter. And for whatever reason, Christians keep showing up to go, well, you know what? If we just would focus more on Jesus and less on social issues and politics, or, you know what? My faith just won't allow me to go there. If Christians would just, you know what? Just go be Christian somewhere. Like, if that's your stance, if that is how you see the world, that's how you view the world, that you think that like the mysterious idioms and things that you present to the world that people don't fully understand is the answer to racism. If you think stuff that rhymes like it's not a skin issue but a sin issue, it ain't a grace issue but a race issue. If you think that stuff is going to solve the issues that we're facing, could you just pick all that stuff up? I'm talking to you right now. Could you just pick your stuff up out of your desk, clean it out, take it with you, put it in a bag, and just go over there? Could you just do that for us, please? Because when we are talking about not dying and our children in the future receiving education that's on par with the education that happens in affluent white neighborhoods, which I happen to live in. I happen to live in it. And if that for you discredits me talking about it because, well, you live in the suburbs. Okay. If that's you, if that is your way of discrediting what I'm saying, then fine. But you know what? Why it discredits it? Because you're looking for a reason to have it discredited. You're looking for a reason to discredit anyone who speaks up about Black lives, which is what happened to Malcolm X, which is what happened to Dr. King, which is what happens to Sean King, which is what happens to me, to Andre Henry, Michael McBride, whose church they just tried to burn down. What messenger is there? Happened to Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reed. What messenger is there in American history who has ever brought forward the idea that Black Lives Matter, who they did not try to discredit? Open your eyes. This is history. This is fact. This is not hyperbole. This isn't mystery. It isn't mysterious. I'm not speaking in riddles. I'm talking to you about actual history. You name a person in the history of the movement for Black lives who spoke up about it, who did not have white evangelical ideology show up to say, you're wrong. Told you I was hyped today. I was gassed. I didn't even realize I had been talking for 28 minutes. I'm sorry, everybody. I didn't mean to go this long with you, but I'm watching my brother Ben McBride yesterday at In-N-Out, whose daughter was almost sent home, or I guess was sent home because her black hair wouldn't fit in a hairnet. And he's being a black. I have a 17-year-old daughter and an 18-year-old and a 15-year-old daughter, and I'm watching him going, man, that's what black dads have to deal with. Like, you don't just have to keep your daughter safe from dating boys, which is what I'm trying to do on a daily basis. I damn near hate boys, if I'm being honest with you. But I also have to be concerned about their black lives when they're driving. Also, my daughter likes to drive around and listen to music. You know, she likes to vibe out after work. And every night that I see her driving, because we have Life 360, because we're nosy, intrusive parents. When I see her driving around, I go, God, please keep her safe. Not just from like criminals, but keep her safe from police. When I send my kids to go run errands and they walk into stores, God, please keep them safe. When they go to work, Ben McBride's daughter goes to work. God, please don't let my daughter be harmed emotionally by them sending her home because of her hair. This is what we're talking about. And Christians want to show up and talk about and parse out the Black Lives Matter movement. Parse it out like, well, they got this thing I don't like, and this thing. They want to legally chop it up and like mince words. Meanwhile, we create shirts like this. Stop shooting us. I don't. I mean, like that. This is a statement that is necessary. Tells me I don't care if I completely, utterly align with everything that everyone who's a part of advocating for Black lives. I don't care if I agree with everything they're saying. I'm not here to start a side argument about their faith and their fundamental beliefs and their ideas. And do you believe in a 7-day creation or do you not believe in a 7-day creation? Are you an annihilationist or do you believe in a fiery hell? Who gives a shit? That's the last thing I'll say. Then I'm getting out of here. I might have told you this before, but it's relevant. I was singing at a church the day after Tatiana Jefferson was killed after playing video games with her nephew. Killed in her own home at 2 a.m. Police officers looked through the window, fired shots, and killed her. I said her name before I sang a song because I felt it was important. I was super intimidated. I'll be really honest with you guys. It was like me standing on stage with a guitar. I'm one of the few Black people in the room. And at this particular service, I might have been the only Black person in the room. And I looked out at this, sea of white faces who were always very gracious to me. And I said her name. And I said, as I sing this next song, I'll remember Tatiana Jefferson, who was murdered last night in her own home by police. And after the service was over, some people came up and, we're talking about it. Mostly, everybody was real kind about it. And this one woman who is a precious woman, older white woman, precious, love her, came up to me and she said, do you know if the young woman knew Jesus? And I understand why she's asking this question. Because Dante's Inferno introduced to Americans or to the world, I guess, some ideologies about the afterlife, right? It's like, well, you know Jesus, you go to heaven. You don't know Jesus, you go to hell. I understand that that's how fundamentalist Christians think about their faith. So that question makes sense. She's supposed to ask that question. But the question for me was irrelevant. And maybe as a Christian, it's supposed to be relevant to me. But in that moment, the question was irrelevant because the woman had just been murdered by people who were supposed to protect and serve her in her own home in front of her nephew. And she was in a long line of Black folks who lost their lives due to anti-Black violence. So the question of whether or not she knew Jesus was an irrelevant one to me in that moment. The question was, what are we going to do? Or I should say, the question should have been, what are we going to do about anti-Black violence and sentiments in our country? If I am a person of faith, the question should not be, do these people know Jesus or these people know Jesus? Which is why I cannot stand the fact that Sean, whatever his last name is, showed up in Minnesota to play some worship songs while people are protesting, because that's more of this ideology that what's most important is that these people know Jesus. That's actually, in this day and age, in this time, the Jewish people had have a term for this, the age to come and the world right now. In the world right now, the question is not about what happens in the age to come, which is mysterious, and we don't know. If we're being 100% intellectually honest, we don't know what's over there. We do know what's right here. And what we know is right here is anti-Black violence. And rather than you going and showing up with some acting like you understand what's over there when you don't, you should show up and say, how can we use our privilege and our whiteness to help you? let me back up. Actually, that ain't even the first question. How can we learn about Jesus from you? Because we are a part of a dominant culture that doesn't fully understand all the nuances of Jesus as a ethnic Jew who lived under oppression, brown skin, who spent time in Egypt as an immigrant. Okay. Take some deep breaths. I'm done. I'm so I needed to get all that off my chest. I hope you were able to receive something out of this that helps you, inspires you. If you're not a part of I don't even care. Guys, grace and peace to you till next time. There's a podcast coming out that will go a little bit further into what I just got done talking about, coming out on Tuesday. Subscribe to the Existential Podcast if you're not already subscribed. Grace and peace to all of you. Till next time.